This is BBC News. I'm Ben Brown reporting live from Manchester, where 22 people are now known to have died after a man detonated a suicide bomb here at the Manchester Arena. Well, police say the man set off a homemade bomb in the foyer of the building as the concert there was ending. The youngest victim was only 8 years old, Safi Roussos, who came from Lancashire. 18-year-old college student Georgina Callender also died. Scores of others were injured and others are still missing.
This is my daughter Olivia. I haven't seen her since 5 o'clock last night. She was at the Ariana Grande contest with a friend. I'm worried sick. If anybody has seen her, please contact the police.
The Prime Minister is in Manchester today, meeting the police and local authorities. Earlier, she condemned what she called a callous attack.
The people of Manchester and of this country have fallen victim to a callous terrorist attack. An attack that targeted some of the youngest people in our society.
Police say they do know the identity of the suicide bomber, and armed police have arrested a 23-year-old man in South Manchester.
This has been the most horrific incident we have ever faced here in Greater Manchester, and one that we all hoped we would never see.
Well, we'll bring you all the very latest developments from here in Manchester.
In other news, the actor Sir Roger Moore, best known for playing James Bond, has died at the age of 89.
My name's Bond. James Bond.
He played the spy in 7 Bond films and received a knighthood for his humanitarian work with UNICEF.
Hello, good afternoon from Manchester. We're here outside the Manchester Arena, the scene of what was last night the worst terrorist attack on British soil since the July the 7th attacks of 2005. Thousands of young concert goers were there last night when a man detonated a suicide bomb shortly after 10:30 yesterday evening. Well, let's take a look at exactly what we know, piecing it together from what the police have told us, and they're saying that they were called to the Manchester Arena at 10:33. The Prime Minister has called the attack at the arena an act of appalling, sickening cowardice. Well, the explosion happened in the arena's foyer as people had begun streaming out through the doors at the end of the concert by the American singer Ariana Grande. Police said the lone male attacker who died in the blast detonated an improvised explosive device. Well, security has been tightened in the wake of the attack. Surrounding streets have been sealed off. Nearby Victoria railway station has been closed. Richard Galpin now reports, and I should warn you that his report does contain some distressing images. We'll bring that to you in a moment, actually. But let me just tell you that Theresa May is, we gather, about to speak because she's come to Manchester to meet the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and other senior police commanders here, and also the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, and other civic leaders here, as Manchester tries to come to terms with this appalling tragedy and atrocity in which 22 people have lost their lives. We know that 2 of them were aged just 8 and 18, and that many of those who were at that concert by Ariana Grande last night were young people, some of them at primary school, others at secondary school, others students. And the Prime Minister is here after chairing a meeting of COBRA, the Government Emergency Committee in London, first thing this morning, where she conferred with MI5 and senior police leaders in London with the intelligence picture surrounding this attack. And there'll be another meeting of COBRA a little later on. I think we can hear now from the Prime Minister, Theresa May, after the suspension of election campaigning. She's here now in Manchester, having met the Chief Constable.
Prime Minister, it's obviously a terrible day. Are you confident that everything is being done to try and make sure that anyone other than the bomber himself who was involved in this is going to be caught?
Yes, I mean, this has been an absolutely horrific attack, particularly given that the victims were young people and children, amongst others. It is an absolutely callous act that has taken place, and our thoughts and prayers must be with the families and friends of all those who have been affected by this terrible attack that has taken place. I've been here today at Greater Manchester Police. I've been talking to the police about the investigation that is continuing, and they and the security services are working, obviously, to identify whether there was a wider group of people involved in this particular incident.
I mean, we've now had the name of the youngest of the people to have died, a young 8-year-old girl from Lancashire. That really is completely horrendous, isn't it?
It is an absolutely barbaric attack that has taken place. To cut off young lives in this way, I mean, it is absolutely devastating, and our thoughts and prayers must be with their families and friends at this horrendous tragedy that has taken place. I'm very clear that the police and the security services have the resources they need to ensure that they continue their investigation. And I would like to thank all those involved, in the police and other emergency services, for the amazing way that they responded to this terrible incident. I've just been hearing of police officers who were off duty turning up, wanting to ensure that they could contribute, that they could help. So many people have helped. That's the great spirit of Manchester, the spirit of Britain. And one thing I'm clear is that the terrorists will not prevail.
People looking into the summer where there'll be lots more concerts and music festivals will be starting to worry whether their children and their young people can be safe this summer. What can you do to reassure people that people will be safe going to concerts and festivals this summer?
Well, the police and others will, of course, be looking at the security of venues to ensure that people can continue to enjoy summer events, feeling secure, and enjoy those events. What is clear is that we are ensuring the resources are available for the police in order to be able to do the job that they need to do. This was a horrendous attack, absolutely horrific, barbaric in its nature. But what I'm also clear about is that we will not let the terrorists win. Our values will prevail.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
So that's the Prime Minister here in Manchester this afternoon, saying again that terrorism will not prevail, and you just heard her say our values will prevail. Well, let's get a report now on exactly what we know about the attack on the Manchester Arena here last night. Our colleague Richard Galpin reports, and I should warn you that some of the pictures and images in his report you may find distressing.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened?
What had been a night of joy and elation for thousands of teenagers turns to absolute panic. Everyone's heard what they think is a bomb going off. And the only thing now is to get out of this arena as fast as possible.
It was shocking, just heard this massive bang and then everyone just started running towards us, screaming and crying, and everyone just trampled over us to get out.
I seen parents with kids running out with blood all over them, and I picked this lady up who said she's looking for her grandkids, who couldn't find her grandkids. She just picked a young girl off the floor who was covered in blood with her parents laying next to him, and it's just all bizarre.
There's glass and there's nuts, metal nuts that have been packed in the device that's exploded, because I can't think of anything else that's got nuts that would be flying around.
Which way? Come on! Traumatised and uncertain what to do, many of the youngsters just keep running. Some searching for their parents who've been waiting to pick them up at the end of the concert. Others looking for relatives and friends who've gone missing. And today, some families are still trying to find their children, having heard nothing from them since last night's concert. Children are amongst the many casualties. All the major hospitals in Manchester being used last night to receive the injured and the dead. And this morning, the police confirmed it was a terrorist attack carried out by a suicide bomber.
This has been the most horrific incident we have ever faced here in Greater Manchester, and one that we all hoped we would never see. Families and many young people were out to enjoy a concert at the Manchester Arena and have very sadly lost their lives. And we believe at this stage the attack last night was conducted by one man. The priority is to establish whether he was acting alone or as part of a network. The attacker, I can confirm, died at the arena. We believe the attacker was carrying an improvised explosive device which he detonated, causing this atrocity.
In Downing Street, flags are flying at half-mast in the aftermath of the worst terrorist attack in Britain since the suicide bombings on London Transport 12 years ago.
All acts of terrorism are cowardly attacks on innocent people. But this attack stands out for its appalling, sickening cowardice, deliberately targeting innocent, defenceless children and young people who should have been enjoying one of the most memorable nights of their lives. Let us remember those who died, and let us celebrate those who helped, safe in the knowledge that the terrorists will never win, and our values, our country, and our way of life will always prevail.
The horror of what happened at the arena last night led to many ordinary people offering to help. Taxi drivers providing free lifts for those who couldn't get back home. Others offering rooms for anyone needing somewhere to sleep. As for who was responsible for this attack, the police believe they do know the person's identity. And already a 23-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the bombing. Also this morning, the first victims have been named. On the left, 18-year-old Georgina Calendar and Safi Roussos, who was just 8. The children at the concert would never have imagined they'd end up like this, having to escape a terrorist attack. But it's clear they were deliberately targeted, and that has provoked both shock and revulsion in this country and around the world. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, terrifying accounts have been emerging all day about exactly what happened in the Manchester Arena last night. People talking about their terror as they were split up and separated from their loved ones, not knowing where they were. And also people talking about the explosion, seeing nuts and bolts flying through the air and seeing casualties as well. Danny Savage reports now, and again I should say that his report, you may find some parts of it distressing.
This is my daughter Olivia. I haven't seen her since 5 o'clock last night. She was at the Ariana Grande contest with a friend. I'm worried sick. If anybody has seen her, please contact the police. Contact somebody, let her know you've seen her. Even if you think you've seen her, just let the police know, please.
An appeal from a desperate mum. Charlotte Campbell hasn't heard from her daughter Olivia, who was at the concert last night. Her family has been out searching for the teenager for hours.
I need my daughter home. I need to know where she is.
On the wards of numerous hospitals across Manchester, the casualties are being treated and the bereaved are being comforted.
And then we saw families and stuff crying and shaking, and we weren't sure what had happened. We thought it was a balloon that had popped, or possibly a wire, because since we were so close to the front, we didn't see the explosion. But we managed to get out of the arena, and then we heard the evacuation bells, and the minute we heard the bells, we just ran up to our hotel, which is just here.
Outside city centre hotels, survivors recounted the horror of what happened inside the arena.
Just towards the last song, she let a load of helium balloons down, quite large, and this bang happened, and we thought, we looked at each other, and then we were like, no, it can't be something that you see on the news all the time, that doesn't happen to people like us. So then we were like, oh, it's balloons. So everyone kind of calmed around us, and then all of a sudden, everyone just started screaming and running in every direction, and there was one girl diagonal, wasn't there? And she tumbled. She tumbled from over the seats.
She went over about three seats.
Oh,
she went with such a force.
On social media, Numerous appeals soon appeared for concert goers to contact home. Deborah Hutchinson from Newcastle wrote, "My daughter Courtney Boyle and partner Philip have gone missing tonight in an attack at Manchester. Please share and help find them. I need them home safe." People who were there tried to offer help online too.
I'm sharing pictures of missing people, people that need help, people that have nowhere to sleep, no food or water, people that are stranded in Manchester, to try and get the awareness out for people that are willing to help.
A picture of chaos and panic emerged.
We heard an explosion, so I was like, we need to run. So we started running, we ran straight out the doors, all the way down to the hotel, and all I could hear was screaming, people crying, everyone was just running everywhere, it was completely madness.
It's hard to imagine a softer target for this attack. So many of the teenagers and children who were there last night were given the tickets as a Christmas or birthday present. Thousands of teenagers and young people have gone to school this morning knowing of a friend or a friend of a friend who was at the concert last night. And now numerous families are having to arrange the funeral of a son or daughter who went out yesterday evening so excited ahead of that concert. Danny Savage, BBC News, Manchester.
We are hearing from Scotland Yard that they're planning to put more armed police officers on patrol at Wembley this weekend for the FA Cup final between Arsenal and Chelsea. So Scotland Yard saying more armed police officers at Wembley for the FA Cup final in the wake of what happened here in Manchester. Let's talk now to Dominic Grieve, who's chair of the Commons Intelligence and Security Committee and joins me now on the line. Thank you very much for being with us. What are your thoughts, Dominic Grieve, after this horrendous attack here in Manchester?
It's indeed an attack, an act of appalling evil, and I have no doubt that the police and the security services will do everything they can to try and understand how it came about and to ascertain if there are any accomplices who need to be brought to justice or stopped. The reality, and we've known this for some time, is that our security services are very good at stopping plots. We've seen this happen consistently over the last few years, but I've always been very conscious, from my point of view, that the risks have been great and that 100% security, I'm afraid, cannot be given. It's impossible. Even if we were to abandon our freedoms and live in a security-conscious, dominated society, we would still not be able to stop this. And I'm afraid we have to maintain our values, as the Prime Minister said. We've got to show that terrorism cannot succeed, and through those values, we will bring this to an end.
And this was, the Manchester Arena behind me here was the softest of soft targets, really, wasn't it? Young people, children at primary school were among the audience there and the victims of this attack.
Yes, the victims were innocent children and young people. The target was, one suspects, specifically chosen to be particularly a horrible act, because that is what these terrorists appear to specialise in. It's what they want to do. I couldn't possibly comment on the position in respect to the security at the arena. It's far too early to say. One has got to face up to the fact that you can provide security within an area, but in its immediate vicinity or its entrance, that may be very much more difficult. So there are always lessons that one can learn from these incidents, and I have no doubt from my experience that the security services and the police do just that. But it's equally right to say, as I said a moment ago, that you can't provide for everything. If there are individuals within society who wish to perpetrate murderous acts and you don't have the intelligence on them beforehand, it may be very difficult to stop them doing it.
Yes, hello. And of course the key question that the police are looking into now is whether this suicide bomber was acting alone or with others as part of a conspiracy.
Yes, and that is exactly what I would be expecting them to do. I don't know. We don't know whether the identity at the moment hasn't been announced of the individual, although we're told that the police believe they know who he is. They will then be following up the necessary leads to establish if there's anything they knew about him, whether he was peripherally on the edges of some form of extremist ideology, and seeing what they can do to follow that up. And they must be left to their task of doing that.
And as we were just saying, Scotland Yard are putting more armed police on patrol at the Cup final. Is that what has to happen now? Do events have to have beefed up security, beefed up policing in the wake of what's happened here?
Clearly, the police must decide as an operational matter what is the best thing for them to do. And to the extent to which further security needs to be provided. Security does provide public reassurance, which is important, but they're going to want to try to target that as much as possible to places where there might be a threat and a risk. And it's important that a desire to see large numbers of police on the streets, for example, isn't in fact a diminution of the other work that they have to do, which may all be equally effective in stopping this type of attack. As I say, it's worth bearing in mind that over the last few years, there have been quite a large number of plots that have been stopped, the individuals brought to justice, prosecuted and imprisoned for trying to carry out or seeking to carry out forms of terrorist outrage. And that's been a great success story in which the United Kingdom has really been in the lead. So the work that's been done by the security services, MI5, the other agencies and the police has, in my experience, been exemplary. But unfortunately, that doesn't provide us with 100% protection.
OK, Dominic Grieve, thank you very much for being with us. Dominic Grieve there, Chair of the Commons Intelligence and Security Committee. Well, let's go now to Anita McVeigh, who's at the Manchester Royal Infirmary, one of 8 hospitals in and around Manchester that are treating the 59 people who were injured in last night's attack. Anita, what's the latest there?
That's right, Ben. Here at the Manchester Royal Infirmary, one of the major trauma centres for the region, there are 9 people being treated. You've also got Salford Royal, another trauma centre, Wythenshawe, that's the University Hospital of South Manchester, the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, which has 12 patients, that's 12 children below the age of 16. You've got Stepping Hill, Royal Bolton, the Royal Oldham and the North Manchester Hospital also involved in looking after those 59 patients in total injured as a result of last night's atrocity. And a little earlier we heard from a couple of the people in charge of health services here, the Chief Officer of Greater Manchester Health and Social Care Partnership, John Rouse, and he was speaking of, if ever you wanted to see one NHS, then last night and this morning, this was a true example of it. He said the worst of times, but also bringing out the best in the people of Greater Manchester who rallied to help, whether those were members of the public offering to donate blood or members of the ambulance service or other medical staff who were volunteering to come in and help. The ambulance service in particular, 300 people involved there from the North West Ambulance Service, some of whom were on rota, but also many others who volunteered to come in even though they were not due to be on shift. So a huge response here from the medical teams. Let's talk now to our health editor, Hugh Pym, who's with me. So Hugh, just bring us up to date on what you're hearing about the medical response.
Well, I think, Anita, we learnt from the comments made a short while ago by John Rouse of Greater Manchester Health and Social Care and Dr. David Ratcliffe of North West Ambulance Service that however sad, however tragic it was, the response was about as good as could have been expected. They had a plan. We were told that actually the plan envisaged a scenario like this, and that enabled them to direct paramedics and ambulances very quickly and then take them to these 8 hospitals, including the major trauma centres like this one, Manchester Royal and Salford Royal, and that had gone off in a way that they were proud of. And as you said, they talked of one NHS, this cooperation between the ambulance staff on the front line and then each hospital having its own major incident plan, bringing in clinicians overnight, doctors, nurses and others coming in to ensure that the right staff were in the right places. And we learned a little bit more about the casualties. Some of the 59, we weren't told how many. Some of them are, as they said, seriously injured, some in intensive care and some will be in hospital for quite a little while.
And just tell us more, Hugh, about the level of preparedness that hospitals like this and the NHS more generally has for major incidents.
Well, there was the regional response with North West Ambulance very soon after hearing about the incident at 10:46, declaring a major incident for their service and authorities across Greater Manchester. And the major trauma hospitals, the trauma network, immediately putting in plan their major incident response, and then ambulance services coming in from the West Midlands, Yorkshire and East Midlands, 60 paramedic vehicles involved. So that was a very quick regional response, and then each hospital has its own plan, and that seems to have gone off pretty effectively in efficiency. And we've heard about staff coming in off shift. We've heard about the public going to donate blood, queuing up at blood donor centres, including one just over the road there, so that the authorities have now said they have enough. So it has been an extraordinary response from the people of Manchester and the people of the staff of the NHS.
Okay, Hugh, thank you very much. Hugh Pym, our health editor. Yes, a chief nurse for the NHS Blood and Transplant Service told me earlier that they now wanted to manage the response in terms of people coming forward to give blood. They were extremely thankful to the people who've queued up to donate blood last night, overnight and this morning, but they say they do now have enough to meet their needs. However, they do want people who have appointments over the next few days, particularly O negative, to go ahead with those appointments.
OK, Anita, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who's in Downing Street. And Vicky, the Prime Minister here in Manchester, having chaired that meeting of COBRA, the government's emergency committee, and we gather that she said there's going to be another COBRA meeting later as well.
Yeah, that's right. Very much dealing with the practicalities of all of this. We know that she, as soon as this news started breaking last night, was of course kept informed throughout the night of what was going on. And then this morning, chairing that meeting, it's a chance for government officials, senior cabinet ministers were there as well, senior police officers, people from the security services, and then officials, people like the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, also joining by a video link. So that allows them all to get in that room to talk about what is going on, how the emergency services are responding, the level of threat, how the investigation is going, all of those things brought together and chaired by the Prime Minister. But of course, in that role as Prime Minister at times like this, it's not just about the practicalities of what is going on. She came out here and really tried to encapsulate how the nation is feeling as they respond to all of this, the horror that people are feeling, and talking too about how, although all terrorist attacks are of course cowardly, she said that this was of particular concern and almost at a different level, because it seems that it was specifically targeting a venue where they knew there would be young people, they knew there would be children. And as we've heard in the last few minutes as well, the Prime Minister responding to the news that one of those who's died is of primary school age, just 8 years old. So she at this time, I think, trying to talk about that, trying to say to people, look, don't dwell on the scenes of carnage, the evil that took place there. Try and look at the hope as well. Try and look at the positive side of this. Take away from it those people that didn't run away from all of that. They ran towards it and tried to help people, members of the public and the emergency services as well. So at a time when people are despairing, because of course she is not the first British Prime Minister to stand here and talk about these things and have to respond to this kind of terrorist attack, she's also trying to say to people to have hope as well.
Vicky, thank you. Let's go to Professor John Gearson of King's College London, Professor of National Security Studies. John Gearson, what are your thoughts after this attack, and what in particular will the intelligence agencies and the police be doing now to try and work out whether this was one man acting alone with this suicide bomb or part of a wider conspiracy?
Well, thank you. I think it's unlikely that this individual is entirely self-supporting. The production of a suicide bomb and the delivery of it is a complicated thing, and this suggests something at the more sophisticated end. That doesn't mean that the bomb itself will necessarily be the most sophisticated. But I think the intelligence services will be focused on whether Britain is about to suffer a wave of suicide bombings, how far we can identify linkages between this individual, who it seems they've already identified by name, although they haven't released that yet, and what it means for international cooperation. But fundamentally, I think the challenge at the moment is for the Prime Minister and the close team around her to strike that balance between being appropriately shocked and communicating how the public feels versus the need to emphasise how normal life can continue, and that's a very difficult message to be passing on today.
And the intelligence services, we know that for the last few years they've quite often foiled several plots a year, but now we had the Westminster attacks, and now we've had this, the most deadly terrorist attack on British soil since the July the 7th attacks back in 2005, and it is just so difficult, isn't it, to stop all of the plots all of the time?
Yes, I think the success of the intelligence services, the security service and the police is something the country should be rightly proud of. It's pretty unprecedented how successful, how many plots have been either disrupted or just haven't occurred, because it's just so difficult to operate in the UK. But that doesn't mean that we can achieve total security. I do think it's very worrying that we now have had our second major suicide attack. I think it's debatable whether certain other attacks were suicide in nature, such as the attack on Westminster, but certainly this was, it seems, a suicide attack, and it must be of great concern. That said, most terrorist plots are disrupted by intelligence, not by physical security, and we're constantly achieving success in the fight against terrorists. It's important to remember that, contrary to this view I often hear said, which is the terrorists only have to be lucky once, that's not correct. They have to be lucky every day not to be caught by a very sophisticated security apparatus that we have in this country.
Professor John Gearson, thank you very much indeed. We can talk now to Steve Rotheram, newly elected Metro Mayor for Liverpool. And Steve Rotheram, thank you very much for being with us. I gather your children were at the concert, is that right?
Yeah, both my girls, aged 19 and 21, got it as a Christmas present, as so many people did. I went to Manchester last night to watch a concert and we're very excited about it.
And just tell us what was their experience when they were there. I mean, they obviously they got out, but did they see or hear the explosion?
Yeah, they were already making their way towards the exit when a large bang and explosion took place to their left, and that caused panic and pandemonium in the arena itself, with people climbing over chairs to see whether they could get quickly to the exits, and people were jostling, of course, as you would expect, but it was quite frightening for them. When they got to the sort of concourse area, then they saw people with blood dripping from wounds, and yeah, the whole thing was a really frightening experience for them, but they were lucky because they came home last night, or early hours of this morning anyway.
And like any father of a child who was there and survived, you must just feel so much immense relief today.
Oh, unbelievable. The phone call that I got from my wife to say, you know, don't panic, but was some of the longest seconds of my life, and the but was the girls are safe, but there's been a major incident in Manchester, and all we were praying for, if you like, is to get the girls home safely, and that took several hours, and they were very, very long hours, but as I say, we're so lucky and so fortunate. Some parents last night didn't get their children back, and we'll never get them back.
And Steve Rotheram, we're just going to show pictures actually of the Prime Minister arriving now at the Manchester Royal Infirmary, where some of the injured are being treated today. 8 hospitals altogether in and around Manchester where the casualties, the 59 injured, are being treated. And Theresa May, who's been meeting the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester and other police commanders, now at the hospital, one of the hospitals where the injured are being treated.